Hi, I'm Paul Bowman, CEO at Wexer, the digital fitness specialist who deliver over 25 million fitness experiences per year for our partners worldwide. Welcome to the Wexer podcast, where I'll be speaking to industry experts to bring you insights and advice to support your business journeys. In today's episode, I'll be talking to Jeames Gillett, a 20-year-old industry veteran, making you sound old a little bit, who has built a number of health and wellness companies, co-founded, scaled, listed, and exited health tech startups, and now works as the group head of growth and ventures at one of the Australians' leading health insurers. James, how are you?
Very well, thanks, Paul, and thanks for the kind intro. A bit of a mouthful there, but yeah,
I got it done.
You got it done. Thanks for being patient. I know this has been a long time in the making, but we finally got here to sit on the desk today and have a good chat.
Yeah, no. Looking forward to it. I'm just really looking forward to your insights. Of course, naturally, we have a lot of fitness execs that listen to this podcast, but really keen to see your insights more from the the insurance world. And I know you've done more than just that, but seeing how you're seeing the world in terms of the space that we're in and the space that you're in. So, but before we get into that, your background, James, just to give a flavour for listeners.
Yeah, so health professional by trade. So went through university and studied exercise physiology. Was a failed physiotherapist, but knew at times. Yeah, look, I went in originally wanting to be a sports physio. When you start to understand that you're 1% of the physiotherapists in the world, and you're typically dealing with knees, backs, and ankles, it's something you move beyond. And so I've cut my teeth in sort of moving from that health world into building a couple of different businesses and being surrounded by some really great minds throughout that journey as well. So one was starting early on, building a small personal training company, and was mentored by an older gentleman at the time, and really just started to shape my passion for business. Then that moved into doing something across Australia with Australia's largest corporate health and wellness company. Yep. And then moved into co-founding a company which is based out of Singapore, which is a digital health company where we delivered into corporate health and insurance companies around the world. So that was a wild ride for the best part of 8 years in terms of raising capital and listing that on the Canadian Securities Exchange, and then exiting that back in 2022. And sort of fast forward that to today, and working in the insurance sector now to help on the other side.
There's so much I need to unpick on that, but I think one of the things that I feel like at the moment is so prevalent that a lot of entrepreneurs are wanting support with is just what are the major the challenges you faced and how you got through them scaling companies. Like, what would be your advice? I know that's real hard, I know it's situational, but have you got any paradigm or framework that you use?
Yeah, look, how long we got I'm sure this could go on for a few days, but look, I think the thing as a founder, and you're always on that hamster wheel of challenges which you're facing. They're either macro in nature, in terms of, do you have product market fit? Do you have enough capital in the bank? Through to, do you have the right people on the bus taking the right direction? And then that can come down into the day-to-day environment as well, in terms of some of those small spot fires that you need to put out. Look, I think for us, we went through that scaling time where we had been on it was our third round of funding, part of our listing process. So we took on a fair bit of capital to help us really go from that startup phase to really scaling that business model. And suddenly you go, well, no longer do I have cash at bank issues and funding problems, which is that challenge is solved. But then you've got to focus your time and attention around bringing the right people into the business, making sure you've got the great culture fit, and doing that at pace means that then you've also got to backfill a lot of the people, the processes, the technology to support that, and doing that in a geographically dispersed workforce across. We're in 4 different countries at that stage. It's no mean feat. So really getting sharp around, where are we going as a collective team, and how do we make sure that everyone you bring in is on that journey? You got the right people all pulling in the right directions, and then probably as a founder, letting go of some of that control from the early days to go, we've got people, we've got brains, and bring in the best talent to help deliver on those problems as well.
And how did you learn that? Because again, I feel like a lot, I know it's been well documented that you can only grow to the paradigm of the founder in terms of how big it could be, because sometimes they hold the company back by making sure that they're still doing every single sale or managing the product or all of these type of things. Like, talk to me about that process of kind of letting go and letting teams take over the baby.
Yeah. Look, I think it just comes down to trust. Like, trust becomes the bedrock for your organization. So bringing the right people in from day one and making sure that they're well vetted is probably that key point. Early on, it's like your first 5 hires become that critical point for the business success. And we didn't get that right, all the time, but certainly when we got the right people on, you just automatically had that trust to go, this person can take care of a hell of a lot of work now, and really start to uplift the whole organization's capability set as well, because you bring in experts within that field, particularly through that scaling phase where you've moved beyond that jack of all trades, trying to get someone who sit across multiple different business lines and or divisions, and then you're starting to get these true experts which can elevate your own thinking and prioritize where you're focusing your time and attention.
Do you think I'm going completely off script here, but do you think because of course I think we've followed a very similar trajectory in terms of generalists to specialists. I actually feel like we're bringing more generalists in as automation, AI starts to become more apparent. I don't know if it's the right move, but I would like to get your thoughts.
Yeah, look, I think this is such a big category at the moment as to how are you doing the automation at the edges or are you doing it at the core? And I think as you start to be able to understand the business direction, so this really starts to dictate where you're best to put some of the personnel. So do you have the right people at the core focusing on some of the deep architectural problems and with the smarts to unpack the full capability of AI? Versus how do you then see the people who are more generalist in nature being able to control a number of different moving projects, which can that AI and the automation can really start to leverage their own capability sets, and rather than working in say just marketing, they can probably sit in product and marketing, which is a nice strategic fit in some instances.
Makes sense. And then I guess the big conversation at the moment is, of course, raising capital and pretty tough times at the moment, and a lot of uncertainty, a lot of changes. Let's not talk about Trump's announcements. So what would your advice be in key lessons that you learned in terms of fundraising? Because you've always been able to do that very successfully.
Yeah, look, and we were fundraising at a very different time, where it was certainly that pre-COVID period. It was investing in growth companies, and versus now, and I've sit on the other side of the fence, is looking at really profitable businesses who have got their unit economics down pat as well. I think early on, my advice to founders is certainly follow the money, and I say that in terms of where their product fits in the market. So an example of that is, bringing that back to the health and wellbeing space. We were very much operating in the corporate health, corporate wellbeing space. And I think if you look at any CFO's agenda, and unfortunately, I still think the same can be said today, health and wellbeing is typically one of those things which gets the first cut from a cost-constrained environment. And so in terms of making sure you've identified where the mandatory spend is within a particular environment, and for us, it was within that corporate health space, and how do we skew our focus to be more of a safety risk, people performance led proposition. And I say that because then when you start to flow into raising your capital, it then allows you to make sure that you've got the right growth trajectory coming through from your P&L, which you're then putting in front of investors. And I think as well, then you've got to then navigate that whole world of how do you then make sure that you continue to grow year in, year out, but then making sure you get the right investors on board as well. And so half the dance is knocking on the right amount of doors to make sure you've got the right people who are then also going to take you through to that next level as well. And I don't think that's a magic formula per se, but it's simply around probably finding a few strategics if that's at all possible in their particular vertical, or making sure that you've actually got those who have had a propensity to invest within a certain vertical, and following that money there.
That's sound advice. I'm hoping people take that in. Moving to, I guess, health insurance transformation, and I guess health care, becoming healthcare companies. I guess maybe let's start with what's your journey? What's your role now working with one of the major health insurers?
Yeah, so I came in originally into they were one of our former clients and major clients in my former life, and had the luxury to be working with their organisation around their whole digital healthcare transformation journey as well. So I had a leg up in terms of understanding the core strategy there. Today, then that's helping to shift them from being this digital healthcare company of the future, and then have a really privileged position, I must say, now in terms of the group head of growth and ventures, to be able to start to look at, well, how does the organisation shift from being this health insurer and the payer in the system to being a more encompassing healthcare group, and really starting to think around that transformation doesn't happen by just being able to build it day to day. It's actually through inorganic acquisitions and looking for the right investment opportunities as well. So,
and I guess, so of course, I guess health insurers, I don't want to talk them down, but they've been focused on paying claims, rather than delivering care. But there's just been a monumental shift in the last 3 years. That's what from our point of view, because of course we've become a lot more relevant in terms of using content, et cetera, to be able to deliver that care. Where's it coming from? What's happened?
Look, I think if you unpack the unit economics of a health insurer, you've really got 4 levers. And so you've got the acquisition and retention lever, which you can pull on. You've got the cost to actually run the business, so your administrative costs. But 86 cents in every dollar spent is going back to members in claims. And so really, if you start to look at how do you make an impact on claims, and again, you could probably look at this very binary and selfishly from an insurance lens, but I'll get to the member benefit shortly. So if you start to look at how do you make an impact on the claims line, well, you really got to start to look at, well, how do you avoid the claims, or how do you substitute the claim spend? And so for an insurer to then start to shift, well, no longer makes business sense to just be a payer in the system. It's how do you start to get ahead of some of that risk, and how do you get ahead of some of that capital exposure, and be more proactive in terms of the approach to members. I think the bedrock, though, in terms of the whole insurance model, though, is providing that financial protection and support. And no one wants to actually, like a car accident, you have car insurance. No one wants to have that car insurance. If you don't, it's a good year, right? The same thing could be said for health insurance. No one wants to end up in the hospital ward. And so for us, it's the right thing to be doing for members as well, when you start to look at how do we help navigate them and be just a small stakeholder, but a meaningful stakeholder within that whole healthcare sector, to impact and influence a member's healthcare journey, and so be that supporting partner for them, whether that be at a stage of being healthy and well, and how do we keep people at that state and probably at a lower health risk profile, but how do we engage them? How do we reward them? How do we incentivize them to keep adopting those healthy habits and behaviors? But equally, if they start to move along that healthcare continuum, how do we make sure we've got the right relevant programs and products and services to also be able to navigate them through whatever those acute or chronic healthcare episodes are, and eventually help them get back to a better state of healthy and well.
And is it a world of literally trying to be preventative? Is that the realm that you're trying to play in, or actually just be the support mechanism if something goes, well, they had access to?
Yeah, I think some of it's access, some of it's directional care, and providing that as that digital concierge to be able to navigate people through a highly fragmented healthcare ecosystem, a very fractured healthcare ecosystem as well, and fragmented. And how do we then make sure that we can help be that guidance and be that support, whether it is at that acute stage, so helping them navigate through the hospital if they've had an unfortunate event, through to hopefully helping them get ahead of that risk and improve their own health and wellbeing state as well. I think that's a utopian state that a lot of the insurers, not only domestically but internationally, are on, and making sure that we can make sure that, at the end of the day, we get a national population which is healthier.
Yeah, and what insurers, I guess, are doing this the best way in terms of, working with communities and tech innovators to drive positive change, in your opinion?
Yeah, look, I think so. It's a different system over in the US, but I think you've probably got some of those systems and sectors which are probably a little bit more advanced. But yeah, certainly more locally. I know that a lot of the big four are doing a lot of things at a grassroots level and within certain populations to help support the social determinants of health and some of those. Totally. That's its own sort of rabbit hole to go into at a later stage. But how do you then start to look at, well, you've got the metro and domestic, but how do we support better in terms of the rural and remote sectors as well, and make sure that we can start to engage government, we can engage the private sector, we can engage the payers in the system as well, to all start to come together, because it's we play a role as an insurer, but certainly not the whole encompassing body, which drives that meaningful change at a national level.
And I've talked about insurance companies coming into the wellness space quite a lot, even recently in Vegas at the Health and Fitness Association show. But a lot of people look at it as a possible threat. Like, I, of course, am always the optimistic thing. The more people are moving, the more better it is. The pie grows. Fantastic for our entire society, and of course the industry that serves that. Do you see that as a threat? Because I see, like in everything I've seen study-wise, even our own studies, is, the live experience is always the key experience. And it's how you support that live experience around it through content, access to better nutritional advice, all the rest of it. Like, it seems to me, I think it's a bit far-fetched that it's going to affect the traditional health and fitness commercial industry.
Yeah, I think you've got to be on the same journey collectively. I think it's bringing the different sectors of the health, and whether it's health and wellness, whether it's in the infrastructure layer, whether it's in some of the healthcare sector as well. Like, we have to join forces, because at the end of the day, you've got an individual at the center of this, which we want to make an impact on, and a positive influence. And as I say, they may be a gym member, they may be an insurance member, they may be a member of a digital fitness application, they may be a member of a chronic disease program, and so how do we all start to coexist within the one ecosystem and help support, drive that change collectively? Some of the advice to startups is saying, well, think about the architecture of the way you've built your product, so that you can exist in isolation, but equally you can be an integrated solution in part of a bigger body, whether that is an insurance or whether that is driven through, say, government or some other different distribution channel. I think the other thing as well is then also making sure that it's never going to be a one size fits all, in terms of digital isn't going to win in isolation. No. The physical world's not going to win in isolation. So how do you then make sure that you've got these experiences and the social connection, going back into probably more the health and fitness and the engagement through the physical world? How do you make sure that there's this interplay between them both? And
of course, there's an argument in terms of, well, you especially if it's connected to reduced premiums or whatever. I always like the world, and I know it's very utopian, but I want to get your opinion. Like, a person that does 15,000 steps, works out every day, versus someone that still has the same maybe weight and height as that individual, theoretically is treated exactly the same. There should be. I think is it fair to say that the more that we get that data happening, more that we see wellness activities happening on platforms that you get to see, the more that we can actually quantify these type of changes? Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think So going back to the first part of that, within Australia, we've got the community risk rated system. So, you being a fit golfer who doesn't drink too many beers on the weekend and is living a pure life over in New Zealand there, versus me who might be a smoker, a drinker, and doing a bunch of bad habits. We've got the same health insurance, but I think that system works well for probably the younger generation, helping support the elderly. And that's why that works on that front. But the going to the second part of the question, there is around, I think we're drowning in data, but thirsty for insights, and I think that's the piece which we need to be able to make sure that we can actually drive the insights back to the individual or back to at a population level, so that we can help individuals navigate their own healthcare experience. And I think that's it's easier said than done. Particularly when you're starting to shift a lot of the architecture from policy centric to member centric, or starting to shift some of the legacy ways of working, and then really start to capitalize on the rich abundance of data that you do have. How do you then start to make sure that we drive that directional care to the right support networks and the right programs and the right individuals at the right times as well? And that's the exciting thing, I think, which we're sitting on at the moment, which is that next generation, which will start to flow through.
And then one more before we go into the crystal ball and look at the future. Of course, from a purely content point of view, we're seeing persona-based content just win. Naturally win. And on all different platforms, if you get the personas right, people want to follow that persona, and then they follow more and more. And actually, what we're seeing in terms of user design is, 80. I think everyone's just so used to getting filled up, content just being distributed to them, like on TikToks and YouTube, that they don't even look anywhere else. So what we're realizing now is that the more we serve up, especially if it's persona based, they'll just do it. They don't even question it. They don't even do anything. Do you see a world where that gets done a little bit more? No, AIA did some with a lot of athletes, local-based athletes. Probably didn't do enough in terms of regular content to get people hooked on it. I get it; they were athletes rather than just content creators. But is that something that it'll be lent into in the years to come?
Yeah, look, there's this. We're saturated with content. To your point, right? And so how do you get that cut through is really the key. And you guys are doing it so well. I think it just is the way which we're absorbing every type of media and information these days is high quality content, which really hits a person's need at the right time and meets them at the right stage of their health journey. There's so many areas where there's a need to uplift that whole health literacy, so you can then start to drive that meaningful habit formation, behavior change, positive choice selection, so that you're actually starting to help drive better health outcomes for different individuals. And so that's certainly something which is a key focus, I think, not only for us, but then also for the broader audience, around how do we then, as I say, drive better health outcomes. And get engagement through that.
I've seen so many, I guess, look at it from a lens of we just need to add everything in there, but actually the whole package didn't really make sense to being relevant to that consumer when they needed it. And I guess, what we're seeing, of course, of course, you have to have wearables, you have to have all these type of stuff. People like that, but there needs to be something that supports and inspires people to be able to make a change or move. And I don't think that comes from technology. Something would have already supported or inspired them before they even got to that point. So it's okay. So how do we drive that at scale? So it's it's going to be a good use case for content, possibly, James.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's meeting the member at whatever the stage they are on that journey, and making sure that they're, as you say, feel inspired and connected to not only themselves but a wider community who are like them. That's really going to be the key.
Totally makes sense. And let's get the crystal ball out now. So in terms of what do you see as the biggest opportunities for innovation, I guess, in the next 5 years?
Yeah, look, I don't think you can sit on any podcasts these days, and then I get asked that question with that AI coming up. So, I'm going to throw that in as the first, answer there. This whole agentic, model is going to be really interesting as to how that accelerates that. And, I start to look at, I was listening to a podcast the other day around, like what is the true capabilities of that? And I think it's looking at the way that that's going to really transform how we do complex problems. So the example they used was going, well, I want to build an underwater agriculture farm. Go and find me, like, what do I need to do? How do I need to resource it? And so historically you step back and go, well, I'm going to need to have, a bunch of, scientists and people who are agriculture specialists and all of these like select people to assemble teams. Suddenly all of that just starts to get removed, where you can start to have these complex agentic agents starting to drive this outcomes, and you go, wow, all right, now I've got a business plan. I know the resource structure I need, the time allocation, et cetera, et cetera. So bring that sort of back into the world of healthcare. I think we're really going to, and we're typically the laggard for a variety of reasons, but I think you start to see the accelerant which can come through there, and the complex problems that can start to solve, whether it's through a diagnostic lens, whether it's pointing a clinician to be focusing on some of those more necessary high touch areas, and getting them to not necessarily focus their time and attention. I think the other pieces I'd be saying there is also around if we can solve some of the interoperability problems as well, and that one will probably run hand in hand with highly fragmented systems, and an ecosystem for that matter. If we can then start to bring together this collection of, I engage in content, and I'm an insurance member, and I go to my local GP, and I go to a number of different healthcare institutions and practices. How do I make sure that me as the individual has the right relevant controls to be able to share the relevant information with the clinicians, the providers, the healthcare institutions when and where necessary? It seems absurd that that's not happening today, but if I'm going to make a bet, that's certainly something which I think is the big opportunity to drive that directional care, hopefully in the not too distant future. Let's see if my health record gets a big unlock for that to help support some of that aspiration there.
No, I like it. And then I guess, on the flip side, like what's the one thing, if you could change something, that you would change in terms of how healthcare is currently delivered?
I think it's probably going back to that problem which we've currently got. It's like this fragmented ecosystem. So I go to my GP and I'm sitting on an Oura Ring, I'm sitting on a Garmin, I've engaged with my health insurer, I've got a number of different applications on my phone, yet none of that information is shared primarily to help support better health at with that GP interaction. And so if we could change something, it would be, how do we start to unlock and avail the right information and probably use some of this new AI technologies and centralized data sources to be able to help drive better healthcare experiences at an individual level, and then hopefully at a population level as well, to start to reverse some of these quite alarming healthcare statistics which we're leaning into.
Let's change it, James, I believe.
Look, it's an exciting space to be in, and I think that's the passion certainly which gets me out of bed every day, and no doubt we've had plenty of chats before as well in terms of how do we contribute to make it, whether it's a small part of it, the change, or starting to look at that at a larger scale. I think there's the opportunity right here, right now, with where that's at, to really make that an impact. And certainly that's something get out of bed and lights me up each and every morning.
Nice. Yeah, I know you like talking to us crazy entrepreneurs. Okay, and then talking about that, how do you see partnerships with companies like Wexer shaping insurance companies' future, enhancing their transition to promote health and wellness through accessibility and kind of digital first solutions?
Yeah, look, it's probably going back to that point I made earlier around this health literacy improvement. Like people, we need to get cut through. We need to have the right content going out to the right members to meet their needs, whether that is within the health and wellbeing end of that healthcare continuum. If they're going through, hospital experience and they may be needing emotional support, so coping mechanisms, coping tools, helping support the family who may be also going through that healthcare experience as a carer as well. And a lot of that second and third effect is often missed as well. So, and if we can provide this education and the quality content to be able to support that, then, we as whether it's an insurer or, a larger body we're doing the right thing at the end of the day. And that's making sure we're looking after the people who have entrusted us with their memberships and the value that we can deliver back to them in return.
Yeah, well said, well said. And then I guess more to you, like, you've kind of ticked a lot of boxes, sir. You've built, you've scaled, you've exited businesses. What motivates you now? I know you kind of mentioned what gets you out of bed, so that's why I wanted to link it in.
Yeah. No, there's look, I've got 3 beautiful young children, so I'm in the trenches on that front, with a 5, 3, and a 8-month-old.
Wow.
But yeah, so there's hence probably for those who are listening, there's big black baggy eyes at the moment.
Yeah, you look sharp. Come on.
Look, I think it's probably my 3 passions sit in the whole building companies and the business side of things, technology, and then health. And if I can sort of sit in that triangle, I really feel as if there's an impact that I personally can have at scale to drive better health outcomes. And I'd like to think, and I don't know whether it sounds cliche or not, but I think if I can probably look back in the years ahead and say, well, where we were back in 2025 through to whether it's 2030, 2035, however long that time horizon has been, and had a small impact around how the healthcare system has been changed through inorganic acquisitions, which has then started to make a health insurer be able to add more value, and deliver health impact to their members, whether that is through building companies, whether that's passing on some knowledge back to startups who have seen around corners, which they may not have, and help shape their growth trajectory. I think that's something I can probably sit around the dinner table and be quite proud of to the kids. And look, hopefully they become a small recipient of that, in the future in the way that healthcare is currently delivered today.
Well said. Well said. I like that. I believe in you too. Come on, let's do it. and then I guess what's been the, I don't know, one book or podcast or framework that's helped you and had the biggest impact on you?
Well, I'll put Wexer aside in terms of the podcast, look, I'm an avid listener to the All In podcast.
Okay.
So for those who do or don't know, so for entrepreneurs / very successful founders and tech people out of the US. And really that for me is a good opportunity to stay connected to what's happening in business, what's happening in Trump's tariffs, which is topical at the moment, to go back to that piece. But what's happening in the world, and it keeps me informed of that. What's happening in the latest tech and trends, and it's delivered in a long form format, which I think makes me in an hour and a half of time, it gets me pretty up to speed with what's happening globally, and helps to make better decisions on a regular basis based off some of those insights. So.
Yeah, no, it's one of my favorites as well. And then if you could go back and give your younger self one bit of advice, what would that be?
Yeah, look, I think I'd be find the passion, and I probably early on was sort of navigating that, where I was very health focused, and then I was mentioned earlier got fortunate or not, but to get surrounded by some really great business minds across my journey, and so that really helped evolve my business thinking, and then that intersection of technology. So for me, that sort of I'm able to now reflect back and go like, where's my sweet spot? And then I think early on that was probably a little bit of a path which you tacked along. So it's probably keep the course to find your passions, and then being able to back yourself with the risks that you do take would probably be the second piece there, because some of the risks that I have taken, some haven't worked out, but certainly the ones that have the ones that didn't, for that matter, even I think you become a better, more equipped from the learnings that you do get through that process, and then through to the ones that have worked well, you're the recipient of the fruits of those risks as well. So I think those two would certainly be the thing I'd be passing to my former self, and making sure that I continue to get the energy to come to work each day, which probably doesn't feel as much as work, as much as play and fun.
Yes, no, that's really well said. And then how do people connect with you, James?
Yeah, I'm probably less of an ex-user, more of an ex-passive participant. So don't come to me for that to listen to my words of wisdom, but reach out to me and connect with me on LinkedIn. It's James, spelled with Jeames. So 2 E's in James, for a lifetime of pain thanks to my mother, and
it's
Gillett,
bougie.
so
It's unique,
James.
James.
It's bougie. Yeah, that's right. It's on trend these days, apparently. So LinkedIn, to answer your question there, Paul, is probably the best way to get in touch, and welcome any conversations which come off the back of this.
Nice one. And look, James, thank you for understanding, I guess, the traditional health and fitness side. When I first kind of started going into the digital health world, you kind of welcomed me with open arms. We talked a lot, so I appreciate that, and I appreciate just the open-mindedness to engage with so many different other innovative companies, for where your position is right now. So, look, thank you so much for everything you do, and I think it's been a very inspiring podcast for any entrepreneur listening. So, thank you so much.
Appreciate the time, Paul.
Cheers. Thank you so much, James.
Cheers.